Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he surveyed his wheat fields on Kepler 442b. The golden stalk swayed gently in the alien breeze, and for a moment, he could almost forget he was 300 light-years from Earth. Almost. The twin suns cast strange shadows across his farm, and the purple-tinted sky reminded him daily that this world would never truly feel like home. He had been one of the first agricultural specialists to volunteer for the colony mission 15 years ago. While others dreamed of exploring new worlds or making scientific discoveries, Marcus simply wanted to grow things. The colony needed farmers, and farming was all he had ever known. His grandfather had worked the soil in Iowa. His father had continued the tradition, and Marcus had planned to do the same until Earth's climate made traditional farming nearly impossible. The morning started like any other. Marcus checked his hydroponic systems, monitored soil pH levels, and inspected his crops for signs of the native pests that had learned to love Earth vegetables. The colony's xenobiologists had assured him these creatures were harmless, but they could devastate a crop in days if left unchecked. As he walked toward the eastern boundary of his property, where the cultivated land met the wild Keplerian forest, he heard something unusual. A low, rhythmic thumping sound, almost like a heartbeat, but too loud and too fast. The sound seemed to come from beneath the ground, somewhere near the ancient rock formation that marked his property line. Marcus had always been curious about those rocks. They were clearly artificial, too perfectly arranged to be natural. But the colony's archaeologists had been too busy with more pressing matters to investigate every old pile of stones. The and rocks formed a rough circle about 20 meters across with strange symbols carved into their surfaces. Most colonists avoided the area, claiming it gave them an uneasy feeling. The thumping grew louder as Marcus approached. He could feel vibrations through the soles of his boots now, and something else, a faint warmth radiating from the ground. His handheld scanner showed elevated thermal readings coming from directly beneath the largest stone in the formation. Marcus had learned to trust his instincts during his years on this alien world. Something was alive down there, and it was in distress. The rhythmic thumping wasn't random. It had the desperate pattern of something trying to break free. He ran back to his farmhouse and grabbed his excavation tools. The colony had issued every settler a basic archaeology kit, partly for research purposes and partly because you never knew what you might need to dig up on an alien world. Marcus had used his kit exactly once before, to create a proper foundation for his grain silo. When he returned to the stone circle, the thumping had grown weaker, but more frantic. Whatever was down there was running out of time. Marcus began carefully removing the soil around the largest stone. The symbols carved into its surface seemed to glow faintly in the strange light of the twin suns, though that might have been his imagination. As he dug deeper, the temperature continued to rise. 3 feet down, his shovel struck something that wasn't stone or dirt. It was smooth and warm to the touch, with a surface that seemed to shift and shimmer like liquid metal. Marcus brushed away more soil and revealed what appeared to be some kind of containment vessel, roughly the size of a small cargo container. The thumping was coming from inside. Marcus found what looked like a control panel on one side of the vessel. The symbols were similar to those on the stones above, but these were clearly meant to be touched. They glowed softly under his fingers, responding to his presence. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should contact the colony's xenoarchaeology team. The thumping stopped. In the sudden silence, Marcus could hear something else, a faint whimpering sound, like puppies crying for their mother. But there was something else in that sound, something that made his blood run cold. It was the sound of intelligence. Whatever was making that noise was trying to communicate. Marcus pressed the largest symbol on the control panel. The vessel opened with a soft hiss, releasing a cloud of warm, humid air that smelled like sulfur and copper. As the vapor cleared, Marcus found himself staring into a space that seemed larger inside than outside. Clearly some kind of advanced spatial folding technology. What he saw inside changed everything he thought he knew about Kepler 442b. Dozens of small serpentine creatures huddled together in the cramped space. They were each about the size of a house cat, with scales that shifted color from deep emerald to bright gold depending on the light. Their eyes were large and intelligent, clearly designed for seeing in low-light conditions. Most striking of all were the small membranous wings folded against their backs and the tiny horns protruding from their heads. They looked exactly like baby dragons from Earth's ancient myths. The creatures, Dragonlings, Marcus decided to call them, were obviously young and terrified. Many showed signs of malnutrition and dehydration. They pressed against each other. For comfort, their large eyes fixed on Marcus with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Marcus had seen that look before, in the eyes of abandoned animals back on Earth. These weren't monsters or threats. They were children, and they were dying. As he knelt beside the vessel, one of the larger Dragonlings slowly approached. It moved, with careful, deliberate steps, clearly fighting against its own fear. When it reached the edge of the container, it looked up at Marcus and made a soft trilling sound. Then it collapsed. Marcus didn't think. He reached into the vessel and gently lifted the small creature. Its scales were warm, but not burning, and he could feel its rapid heartbeat against his palm. The Dragonling was barely breathing, its eyes growing dim. The farmer in him recognized the signs immediately. These creatures were starving, but it was more than that. They needed something specific, something their captivity had denied them. The way they pressed toward the opening of the vessel, the way they tilted their small heads toward the twin suns above, told him everything he needed to know. They needed light. They needed space. They needed freedom. Marcus looked around the stone circle with new understanding. This wasn't just an archaeological site, it was a prison. Someone had trapped these creatures here, probably for centuries, in a space barely large enough to contain them. The stones above weren't marking a sacred site. They were hiding a crime. As the Dragonling in his hand struggled to breathe, Marcus made a decision that would change not just his life, but the fate of two entire species. He was going to do something that violated every first contact protocol, every colonial regulation, and every bit of common sense he possessed. He was going to save them all. Marcus carried the dying Dragonling to his farmhouse, his mind racing with possibilities and problems. The creature was so light he could barely feel its weight, but its breathing was growing more labored with each step. Behind him, the soft cries of the other Dragonlings faded into the distance, but he could still hear their distress calls echoing across his fields. Inside his kitchen, Marcus gently placed the Dragonling on a soft towel under his heat lamp, a piece of equipment he used for germinating seeds in the harsh Keplerian winter. The creature's scales immediately brightened at the touch of the warm light, shifting from dull brown to a vibrant emerald green. Its breathing steadied, and those large, intelligent eyes focused on Marcus with what looked suspiciously like gratitude. But heat alone wouldn't be enough. Marcus could see the signs of severe malnutrition in the Dragonling's sunken flanks, and the way its wings hung limply at its sides. The question was, what did a baby dragon eat? His first instinct was to offer water, which the creature accepted eagerly, lapping from a small dish with a forked tongue that glowed faintly blue in the artificial light. Next, Marcus tried small pieces of his emergency protein rations. The Dragonling sniffed them curiously but showed no interest in eating. Fruit was also rejected, as were vegetables, grains, and even the synthetic meat substitutes he kept for special occasions. The Dragonling would take water readily enough, but everything else was ignored or actively avoided. Marcus was beginning to panic when he noticed something strange. Every time he moved near his mineral supplement cabinet, where he kept various compounds for adjusting soil chemistry, the Dragonling would lift its head and make soft, chirping sounds. When Marcus opened the cabinet, the creature became agitated, trying to climb off the towel despite its weakness. On a hunch, Marcus pulled out a container of iron sulfate crystals. The Dragonling's reaction was immediate and dramatic. Its scales flared to bright gold, its wings spread slightly, and it made an urgent trilling sound that was clearly a demand for food. Marcus placed a small crystal on the towel. The Dragonling immediately grabbed it with tiny, surprisingly dexterous claws and popped it into its mouth. The crystal dissolved instantly and the creature's eyes began to glow with a soft internal light. "You eat minerals," Marcus said aloud, hardly believing it. "That's why you're starving. That container was probably designed to recycle your waste, but not to provide new minerals. Over the next hour, Marcus experimented with different compounds from his farming supplies. The Dragonling showed preferences for certain metals. Iron, copper, and zinc were favorites, but rejected others entirely. It also consumed various crystalline formations with obvious pleasure, making happy purring sounds that reminded Marcus of a contented cat. As the creature ate and grew stronger, Marcus noticed other changes. Its scales began to shimmer with an internal light, and occasionally small sparks would dance between its tiny horns. When it finally felt strong enough to stand, the Dragonling spread its wings fully for the first time. They were beautiful. Translucent membranes shot through with veins that glowed like fiber optic cables. But Marcus's wonder was interrupted by a new problem. His comm unit was chiming with an incoming message from the colony's administrative center. Dr. Sarah Way, the colony's xenobiology director, appeared on the small screen. Marcus, we're reading some unusual thermal signatures from your sector. Our satellites picked up a significant energy release about 2 hours ago, centered on your property. Are you experiencing any equipment malfunctions? Marcus glanced at the Dragonling, which had curled up under the heat lamp and was watching the conversation with obvious intelligence. Those large eyes seemed to understand that this was a critical moment. Nothing unusual here, Dr. Way, Marcus said, hoping his voice sounded normal. Just been doing some soil preparation for the next planting cycle. Might have triggered some kind of underground thermal vent. Dr. Way frowned. The readings were quite significant, Marcus. We're talking about temperatures that could indicate geological instability. I'm sending a survey team to check it out tomorrow morning. Marcus's heart sank. A survey team would find the stone circle, the opened container, and the remaining Dragonlings. He had no idea what the colony's protocols were for discovering imprisoned alien life forms, but he doubted they included letting a farmer nurse them back to health in his kitchen. I'll keep an eye out for any problems, Marcus said. But honestly, everything seems normal here. After Dr. Way signed off, Marcus sat back in his chair and looked at the Dragonling. The creature had been listening to the entire conversation, and now it made a series of soft clicks and trills that sounded almost like speech. I know, Marcus said. We have a problem. The Dragonling tilted its head and made another sound, a questioning trill that was so obviously a what, that Marcus nearly laughed despite the situation. You understand me, don't you? Marcus asked. You can't speak our language yet, but you understand. The Dragonling nodded, actually nodded like a human would. Marcus stood up and began pacing. There are more of you in that container. Dozens more, and they're all starving just like you were. But I can't take care of all of you here. And if the survey team finds them tomorrow... He trailed off, but the Dragonling seemed to understand the implications. It made a low, mournful sound and looked toward the window, in the direction of the stone circle. Marcus made his decision. I'm going to move them, all of them, tonight. The Dragonling perked up immediately, its scales brightening. But I can't do it alone, Marcus continued. I need help, and I need a place to hide them until I can figure out a permanent solution. The Dragonling hopped down from the towel and waddled over to Marcus's boots. It looked up at him and made an urgent chattering sound, then moved toward the door. You want to go back? Marcus asked. You want to help rescue the others? Another nod. Marcus gathered supplies, more mineral compounds, several heat lamps, blankets, and his heavy-duty excavation equipment. The Dragonling watched his preparations with obvious approval, occasionally making small sounds that Marcus was beginning to interpret as encouragement. As the twin suns set and Kepler 442b's 3 moons rose in the purple sky, Marcus loaded everything into his utility vehicle. The Dragonling climbed onto the passenger seat and looked at him expectantly. This is crazy, Marcus said. I'm risking my place in the colony, probably violating a dozen different laws, and I don't even know if I can keep you all alive. The Dragonling reached out with one tiny claw and gently touched Marcus's hand. Its scales pulsed with warm golden light, and for a moment, Marcus felt something he had never experienced before. A direct emotional connection with another intelligent being. He felt the creature's gratitude, its hope, and its complete trust in him, but he also felt something else. Memories that weren't his own. Images of a vast underground city, filled with creatures like this one but fully grown. Magnificent beings with wingspan of 40 feet or more, their scales shining like precious metals, their intelligence vast and ancient. And then other images, the arrival of ships from space, a war that lasted centuries, and finally defeat and imprisonment. The Dragonling was showing him its people's history. They were prisoners of war, Marcus whispered. Someone conquered your world and locked your children away. The Dragonling made a sound that was unmistakably agreement, followed by what could only be described as a plea. Marcus started the engine. Don't worry, he said. I'm going to get them all out. And then we're going to figure out how to find your people. As they drove through the night toward the stone circle, neither Marcus nor the Dragonling noticed the small surveillance drone that detached itself from a nearby tree and began following them at a discreet distance. The rescue operation took most of the night. The container that had seemed impossibly cramped for dozens of Dragonlings turned out to be even worse than Marcus had imagined. The spatial folding technology had created a space roughly twice the size of his living room, but it contained 43 Dragonlings of various ages and sizes. The smallest were barely larger than his fist, their scales pale and translucent from malnutrition. The largest were nearly the size of small dogs, but even they showed signs of stunted growth. All of them were terrified when Marcus first appeared at the container's opening, huddling together in the far corners and making distressed whimpering sounds. But the Dragonling Marcus had rescued earlier, who he had started thinking of as Scout, changed everything. The little creature flew down into the container on wings that were still weak but functional, and began what could only be described as an explanation. Scout made a series of complex sounds, gestured toward Marcus with wing movements that looked almost like sign language, and gradually calmed the others. The trust was tentative at first. The younger Dragonlings remained hidden behind their older siblings, but eventually curiosity overcame fear. They began emerging from their hiding spots, sniffing the air where Marcus's scent mixed with Scout's, and making soft questioning sounds. Marcus lowered a basket into the container and Scout immediately climbed in. After a moment's hesitation, 2 of the other Dragonlings joined it. That seemed to be the signal the rest needed. Within an hour, Marcus had successfully relocated all 43 Dragonlings to a large equipment shed behind his farmhouse. The shed had originally been designed to house his harvesting machines, but Marcus quickly converted it into a temporary sanctuary. He installed heat lamps throughout the space, set up feeding stations with various mineral compounds, and created sleeping areas using blankets and towels. The Dragonlings explored their new environment with obvious wonder, many of them spreading their wings fully for the first time in what might have been decades. But the real surprise came when Marcus offered them food. Scout demonstrated how to eat the mineral crystals, and the others quickly followed suit. However, Marcus noticed that different Dragonlings preferred different types of minerals. Some gravitated toward iron and copper compounds, others preferred zinc and magnesium, and a few showed interest in more exotic elements like titanium and rare earth metals. As they ate and grew stronger, the Dragonlings began to show distinct personalities. Some were bold and curious, immediately approaching Marcus and examining his tools with obvious intelligence. Others remained shy and cautious, watching from a distance but showing clear interest in everything he did. A few appeared to be natural leaders, organizing the others and making decisions about sleeping arrangements and food distribution. Most remarkably, they began to communicate with Marcus. It started with simple gestures, pointing toward things they wanted, nodding or shaking their heads in response to questions, and using wing positions to indicate emotions. But by dawn, some of the older Dragonlings were attempting to mimic human speech patterns, producing sounds that were clearly trying to be words. Scout proved to be the most linguistically gifted. By morning, it could produce recognizable versions of Marcus, food, water, and thank you. The last phrase nearly brought tears to Marcus's eyes, especially when Scout taught it to the others and they began repeating it in a chorus of tiny, musical voices. But Marcus's temporary happiness was shattered when his comm unit chimed at sunrise. Dr. Wei's voice was sharp with concern. "Marcus, we have a problem. Our overnight satellite sweeps show massive thermal activity across your entire property. Whatever's happening there, it's getting bigger. I'm mobilizing a full investigation team. They'll be there in 3 hours." Marcus looked around the shed at 43 pairs of large, intelligent eyes watching him with complete trust. Some of the Dragonlings were playing together now that they had space to move, engaging in what looked like aerial tag games. Others were carefully grooming each other's scales with obvious affection. A few of the smallest ones had fallen asleep in a pile under one of the heat lamps, making soft purring sounds. "Dr. Wei," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady, "I really think you're overreacting. Maybe the geological surveys missed some natural thermal vents in this area." "Marcus, the energy signatures we're reading are off the charts. According to our instruments, you've got enough thermal activity to power half the colony. And it's not geological. The patterns are too regular, too organized. We're dealing with something artificial." She was right, of course. 43 dragonlings, even young ones, generated considerable body heat. And as they grew stronger and began using what appeared to be natural bioelectrical abilities, they were probably lighting up every sensor the colony had. After Dr. Wei signed off, Marcus sat down heavily on a supply crate. Scout immediately flew over and landed on his shoulder, making concerned trilling sounds. "We need a new plan," Marcus said, "and we need it fast." Scout made a series of complex vocalizations, pointing first at Marcus, then at the other dragonlings, and finally toward the ceiling. It took Marcus a moment to understand. "You want to leave? Find somewhere else to hide?" Scout nodded, but then made another sound and gestured more specifically. It wasn't just about hiding. Scout was pointing toward the sky. "You want to go up? Higher ground?" More complex gestures. Scout was trying to communicate something important, but Marcus was missing it. Then one of the larger dragonlings approached. This one had scales that shifted between deep blue and silver, and its eyes held an ancient intelligence that made Marcus suspect it was older than it appeared. The dragonling made a sound that was clearly a name, Sage, and then began what could only be described as drawing in the dust on the shed floor. Using its claws with surprising precision, Sage sketched a rough map. It showed Marcus's farm, the stone circle, and then extended beyond both to areas Marcus had never explored. In the mountains to the north, Sage drew what looked like cave systems, and then added symbols that obviously represented dragonlings, but these were much larger than the ones in the shed. "There are more of you," Marcus said. "Adults in the mountains." Sage nodded emphatically, then drew lines connecting the cave systems to other locations. "More groups. More survivors." Scout made an urgent sound and pointed at Sage's drawing, then at the direction where they could hear vehicles approaching in the distance. "They're coming early," Marcus realized. "We're out of time," but Sage wasn't finished. It drew one more symbol in the dust, a human figure standing next to a large dragonling with lines connecting them that clearly represented communication or cooperation. Marcus stared at the drawing. "You want me to help you contact the others? You want to reunite your people?" Both Scout and Sage nodded, and around the shed other dragonlings began making agreeable sounds. But there was something else in their expressions, a desperate urgency that Marcus didn't fully understand until Sage drew one final image. This one showed the stone circle again, but now there were more containers around it, many more, and lines extending from them to other locations across the planetary surface. "There are others," Marcus whispered. "Other prisons, other groups of dragonlings." The sound of approaching vehicles was getting louder now. Marcus could see dust clouds on the horizon, moving fast toward his farm. Scout tugged at Marcus's shirt and made an urgent sound, then flew toward the shed's rear exit. The message was clear. They needed to run, and they needed to run now. Marcus grabbed his emergency pack and began herding the dragonlings toward the back of the shed. As they moved, he made a promise that would commit him to a path from which there would be no return. "I'll help you find them all," he said.
"Every last one of your people?"
"But first, we need to get you somewhere safe." As the investigation team's vehicles crested the hill toward his farmhouse, Marcus and 43 dragonlings slipped out the back of the shed and headed for the wild country to the north, leaving behind the only life Marcus had known for 15 years. Behind them, the surveillance drone that had been watching all night transmitted its final data burst to a receiver that was definitely not part of the colony's communication network. The journey into the mountains proved more challenging than Marcus had anticipated. The dragonlings, though growing stronger by the hour, were still too young for sustained flight. The larger ones could manage short gliding distances, but the smallest could barely get airborne. Marcus found himself essentially leading a traveling nursery through increasingly rough terrain, but the dragonlings adapted quickly. The older ones took turns carrying the smaller ones during difficult stretches, and they all seemed to understand the need for stealth. When Marcus called for quiet, They immediately silenced their natural chatter and communicated through subtle wing gestures and color changes in their scales. Scout proved invaluable as a guide. The little dragonling seemed to have an innate sense of direction, consistently leading them toward the mountain caves that Sage had drawn in the dust. More importantly, Scout could sense things that Marcus's human senses missed: underground water sources, areas with natural thermal vents that would provide warmth, and potential dangers. On their second day of travel, they encountered their first major obstacle. A sheer cliff face blocked their path, rising nearly 200 feet to a plateau above. Marcus studied the rock wall with growing despair, realizing they would need specialized climbing equipment to scale it safely. But Sage had other ideas. The blue-scaled dragonling flew up to examine the cliff face, then returned with obvious excitement. It began making complex vocalizations and drawing symbols in the dirt again, this time showing a network of tunnels running through the rock. There's a cave system, Marcus realized. You know a way through. Sage led them to what appeared to be a solid rock wall covered with the same strange symbols they had seen at the stone circle. When Sage pressed its claws against specific symbols in a particular sequence, part of the wall simply dissolved, revealing a tunnel entrance wide enough for Marcus to walk through comfortably. Inside, the tunnels were clearly artificial, too perfectly round, too precisely angled to be natural formations. But they were also ancient. The walls showed signs of immense age, and strange crystals embedded in the rock provided a soft, blue-white light that was perfectly suited to dragonling vision. As they traveled through the tunnel network, Marcus began to understand that they were walking through the remnants of a vast civilization. Side passages led to chambers that might once have been living spaces, workshops, or storage areas. Everything was sized for beings much larger than the dragonlings he was escorting, clearly designed for full-grown dragons. The dragonlings grew more excited as they moved deeper into the tunnel system. They began making new sounds, not the simple trills and chirps Marcus had learned to recognize, but complex vocalizations that had the rhythm and structure of actual language. Several of them pressed their claws against symbols on the walls, causing various sections to glow or activate. Most remarkably, their scales began displaying colors and patterns Marcus had never seen before. It was as if being in this place was awakening something in their genetic memory, bringing out capabilities that captivity had suppressed. After several hours of travel, they emerged from the tunnels onto a hidden plateau deep in the mountains. Marcus stopped in amazement at what he saw. The plateau contained the ruins of what had once been a magnificent city. Spires and arches stretched into the sky, all carved from the same crystalline stone as the tunnels. Some structures were damaged or partially collapsed, but many remained intact, their surfaces covered with the flowing script that seemed to be the dragon's written language. But the ruins weren't empty. Movement in the shadows between buildings caught Marcus's eye, and then he saw them, adult dragons, dozens of them, emerging from their hiding places to investigate the new arrivals. These were creatures of impossible beauty and obvious intelligence, with wingspans that could exceed 50 feet and scales that reflected light like living jewelry. The adult dragons approached cautiously, their large eyes fixed on Marcus with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. But when they saw the dragonlings, everything changed. Sounds of joy and reunion filled the air as dragons were reunited with children they had thought lost. Forever, Scout flew immediately to a magnificent silver dragon with scales that shifted between platinum and gold. The emotional reunion left no doubt that this was Scout's parent, and Marcus found himself wiping away tears as he watched the family embrace. But not all the reunions were joyful. Some of the adult dragons made mournful sounds when they realized that children they had been searching for weren't among the rescued group. The implications were clear. There were other prisons, other groups of dragonlings still trapped and waiting for rescue. The silver dragon that was Scout's parent approached Marcus. When it spoke, its voice was deep and melodious with perfect pronunciation despite the inhuman vocal apparatus. "Human Marcus Chen," the dragon said, somehow knowing his name. "I am Celestine, elder of the northern clans. My daughter has told me of your kindness and courage. You have done something unprecedented. You have chosen to help our people despite having no obligation to do so." Marcus was stunned. "You speak our language perfectly. We have been monitoring your colony since your arrival," Celestine explained. "We learned your languages, your customs, your technology, We have been waiting to see what kind of beings you truly were. You've been watching us for 15 years? We have been prisoners on our own world for over 3 centuries, Celestine replied. The hegemony conquered our civilization, scattered our people, and imprisoned our children as insurance against rebellion. When your colony ship arrived, we hoped, but we have learned to be cautious. Many species have come to our world over the years, and most proved to be allies of our conquerors. Marcus felt a chill. The hegemony, they're still out there? Very much so. And they will not be pleased that you have interfered with their prison system. The containers holding our young were monitored. They will know what you have done. Scout flew over and landed on Marcus's shoulder, making concerned sounds. Which is why, Celestine continued, we must act quickly. You have forced our hand, Marcus Chen, but perhaps that is for the best. We have been hiding too long, allowing our children to suffer while we planned and prepared. Your courage has reminded us of our own. Sage approached and began drawing in the dirt again, this time creating an elaborate map that showed the entire continent. Dozens of locations were marked with symbols representing prison containers. There are 47 known sites, Celestine explained. Each contains between 20 and 60 young dragons. Nearly 2,000 of our children remain trapped. Marcus stared at the map. That's impossible. I'm just one person. I can't. You will not be alone, Celestine interrupted. Your actions have proven that humans can be trusted. We will work together. Another dragon approached, this one smaller than Celestine but with scales that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When it spoke, Marcus heard the voice of someone accustomed to command. I am Shadowflight, military commander of the Resistance. For 3 centuries we have operated in secret, gathering intelligence and waiting for the right moment to strike, but we have been too few, and the hegemony too well prepared. Your colony, however, changes the strategic balance. My colony doesn't even know you exist, Marcus protested. That will change, Shadowflight said grimly. The hegemony will respond to what you have done. They will likely move against your colony to prevent further interference. When they do, your people will need allies who understand their capabilities. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. I never meant for any of this to happen. I just wanted to help some starving animals. Scout nuzzled against his cheek and made a soft sound. Celestine translated. She says you saw children in need and chose compassion over safety. That is the measure of a being worth trusting. As the twin suns began to set over the hidden dragon city, Marcus realized that his life as a simple farmer was over. He had become something he never wanted to be. A bridge between species, a catalyst for war, and possibly the only hope for thousands of imprisoned children. But looking around at the reunited families, seeing the joy in Scout's eyes as she played with dragon children her own age for the first time, Marcus knew he had made the right choice. The question now was whether he would live long enough to see all the dragon children free. The hegemony response came faster than anyone expected. Marcus was awakened before dawn by the sound of dragon wings and urgent voices. Shadowflight landed on the terrace outside the guest chamber where Marcus had been sleeping, the massive dragon scales dark with agitation. They have moved against your colony, Shadowflight announced without preamble. 3 hegemony cruisers dropped out of hyperspace 6 hours ago. They are demanding the return of stolen property and threatening military action if their demands are not met. Marcus bolted upright, his heart racing. My people don't even know what happened. They have no idea about any of this. Which is why we must act now, Celestine said, landing beside Shadowflight. We cannot allow innocent humans to suffer for your act of compassion. It is time to reveal ourselves to your colony. Within an hour, Marcus found himself aboard something that defied every principle of physics he thought he understood. The dragon transport wasn't a ship in any conventional sense. It was a living symbiosis between dragon pilots and what appeared to be a crystalline organism that could reshape itself for optimal flight. The vessel moved through the atmosphere with impossible grace, completely silent and apparently invisible to most sensor systems. Scout rode with Marcus, perched on his shoulder and providing a running commentary in the mix of draconic and broken English she had developed. She was excited to be flying again, but Marcus could sense her nervousness about returning to the area where she had been imprisoned. From the air, Marcus could see his farm and the colony beyond it. 3 massive alien ships hung in the sky above the settlement like predators waiting to strike. They were clearly military vessels, all angles and weapons ports designed to intimidate as much as to fight. Hegemony design philosophy, Shadowflight explained, noticing Marcus's stare. They believe that fear is the most efficient tool of control. The Dragon transport landed in the colony's central plaza, causing immediate chaos. Colonists scattered in panic, some running for shelter while others simply stood and stared in amazement. The colony's security forces quickly surrounded the vessel, though their weapons looked pitiful compared to the alien ships overhead. Marcus emerged first, hands raised in a peaceful gesture. "My name is Marcus Chen," he called out. "I'm a colonist here, and these beings are allies." Dr. Wei pushed through the crowd, her face pale with shock. "Marcus, what in God's name is happening? First you disappear, then alien warships show up, and now you're traveling with dragons," Marcus said simply. "The native intelligent species of this planet, and they're here to help us." Celestine emerged from the transport next, her magnificent form causing gasps of awe and terror from the assembled crowd. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly across the plaza. "People of Earth Colony Kepler 442b, she began. "I am Celestine, speaking for the dragon clans of this world. You are in great danger, and we offer our alliance in the trial to come." Governor Harrison, the colony's elected leader, stepped forward with obvious courage despite his fear. "Are you threatening us?" "On the contrary," Celestine replied. "We wish to protect you from those who are. The ships above your colony belong to the Hegemony Collective, an empire that has enslaved our people for centuries. They have come because your citizen Marcus Chen rescued our children from prison, and they demand his surrender along with the return of our young." Dr. Wei looked at Marcus with a mixture of betrayal and confusion. "You found alien life and didn't report it?" "Marcus, that violates every protocol we have." "I found children dying in a prison," Marcus replied firmly. "Everything else was secondary." Before Dr. Wei could respond, the air filled with the sound of energy weapons powering up. The Hegemony ships had detected the Dragon transport and were preparing to fire. Shadowflight emerged from the vessel, followed by a dozen other adult dragons. "Governor Harrison," the military commander said urgently, "we need to evacuate your people immediately. Hegemony policy is to eliminate any witnesses to their slave-taking operations." "Slave-taking?" Governor Harrison's voice rose in alarm. "The children they imprisoned were taken during raids on civilian populations," Celestine explained. "It is their standard practice when conquering new worlds. Take the young to ensure the compliance of their parents. They will assume your colony is now involved in our resistance and act accordingly." The first energy beam struck the colony's power station, turning it into a crater of molten metal. The message was clear: surrender or be destroyed. "We have to evacuate," Governor Harrison said, but Dr. Wei shook her head. "There's nowhere to go. Our ships can't outrun military vessels, and we have 15,000 people in this colony." Shadowflight made a sound that was distinctly predatory. "Then we make a stand. Dragons of the northern clans prepare for aerial combat." What happened next would become the stuff of legend among human colonies. Dozens of dragons rose from concealment around the colony, their scales shifting to combat configurations that made them nearly invisible against the sky. They moved with incredible speed and precision, engaging the Hegemony fighters that launched from the cruisers. But the real surprise came when the dragons began using abilities that no one, human or Hegemony, had expected. Beams of coherent energy shot from their mouths, not simple fire but focused plasma that could cut through military-grade armor. Their scales didn't just provide camouflage. They could deflect and redirect energy weapons, turning the Hegemony's own firepower against them. Marcus watched in amazement as Scout's parent, Celestine, engaged a Hegemony fighter in aerial combat. The dragon moved like liquid light, dodging weapon fire while returning devastating attacks of her own. When the fighter tried to escape, Celestine simply disappeared, actually teleported, reappearing directly above the enemy craft and tearing it apart with claws that could apparently cut through anything. "How?" Dr. Wei asked, staring at the battle raging overhead. "Dragons are not simply animals," Shadowflight explained as he coordinated the defense. "We are a technologically advanced species. Our bodies are living weapons, our scales are organic computers, and our abilities are the result of millions of years of evolution guided by intelligence." The tide of battle turned when the dragon youngsters that Marcus had rescued joined the fight. They couldn't match their parents' combat capabilities, but they had other skills. Working together, they created a communications network that allowed perfect coordination between all friendly forces. They also began hacking into the hegemony ship's computer systems, turning the invaders' own weapons against each other. Scout landed on Marcus's shoulder and chirped excitedly, then pointed toward the largest hegemony cruiser. On its hull, the symbols that had once controlled the prison containers were now glowing and changing, rewriting themselves under the influence of the young dragon's abilities. They're taking control of the ship, Marcus realized. Within minutes, the largest hegemony cruiser was firing on its companions. Caught between attacking dragons and a hijacked ally, the remaining hegemony forces attempted to retreat, but the dragons weren't finished with them. Celestine appeared on the main communication channel, her voice broadcast to both the colony and the fleeing hegemony ships. Commander of Hegemony Fleet Designation 77 Alpha, you will deliver a message to your superiors. The dragons of Kepler 442b are no longer your prisoners. We have found allies among the humans, and together we will liberate every child you have stolen. Leave this system immediately or be destroyed. The hegemony ships jumped to hyperspace, but not before their commander's response came through. This action constitutes an act of war against the hegemony collective. This system is now designated a military target. Expect retribution. As the immediate danger passed, Governor Harrison approached Marcus and Celestine. I don't think any of us fully understand what just happened here, but it's clear that our colony's situation has changed dramatically. Indeed, Celestine agreed. You are now allied with a species that the hegemony considers to be escaped slaves. This will bring both great danger and great opportunity. Marcus looked around at the colonists, many of whom were still staring in wonder at the dragons circling protectively overhead. What kind of opportunity? Shadowflight landed nearby, his scales still showing combat configurations. The hegemony has enslaved dozens of species across this sector of the galaxy. Your people have something they fear, the ability to inspire others to resist. If we work together, we can do more than just free our own children. We can liberate entire worlds. Dr. Wei stepped forward, her scientific mind already working on the implications. You're talking about interstellar war against a galactic empire. We are talking about freedom, Celestine replied simply. For our children, for your people, and for every enslaved species in hegemony space. Scout made an urgent sound and pointed toward the horizon, where more dragons were approaching. Hundreds of them from all directions. The dragon clans were mobilizing for the first time in centuries. Marcus realized that his simple act of compassion had triggered something far larger than he had ever imagined. The rescue of 43 dragonlings had become the spark that would ignite a galactic revolution. The question now was whether humanity and dragonkind together would be strong enough to win it. The transformation of the colony began immediately. Within days of the hegemony attack, the settlement became something unprecedented in galactic history, a true alliance between humans and dragons working as equals toward a common goal. Dr. Wei led the scientific exchange program, working closely with dragon scholars to understand their biotechnology. The results were staggering. Dragon scales weren't just organic armor. They were living computers capable of processing information at quantum speeds. Dragon breath wasn't simply fire. It was controlled plasma generation that could be precisely modulated for everything from welding to weapons to energy production. They don't build technology, Dr. Wei explained to an emergency council session. They grow it. Every adult dragon is essentially a living starship, complete with faster-than-light communication, defensive systems, and weapons that make our best military hardware look primitive. But the dragons were equally fascinated by human capabilities. Shadowflight spent hours with the colony's engineers, marveling at humanity's ability to create complex machines from simple materials. You build tools to extend your capabilities, Shadowflight told Marcus during one of their planning sessions. We evolved our capabilities directly into our biology. Both approaches have advantages, but together, the collaboration yielded immediate results. Human engineering principles applied to dragon biotechnology produced hybrid systems that neither species could have created alone. Dragons learned to integrate human-designed computer systems with their organic processors, vastly expanding their analytical capabilities. Humans learned to work with living materials that could adapt and evolve in real time. But the most important collaboration was happening on a smaller scale. Scout had become the colony's unofficial ambassador, working with human children to develop new communication protocols. She was growing rapidly now that she had proper nutrition and freedom, and her intelligence was expanding to match her physical development. Marcus' friend, Scout said during one of their morning walks, her English now fluent despite the unusual accent created by her dragon vocal cords. I have been thinking about the rescue missions. Over the past 2 weeks, combined human-dragon teams had successfully liberated 6 more prison sites, freeing over 300 young dragons. Each mission taught them more about hegemony security systems and revealed the true scope of their enemy's operations. What about them? Marcus asked. The patterns are wrong, Scout replied, her scales shifting to display complex mathematical calculations. The hegemony isn't just taking our children randomly. They're targeting specific bloodlines, specific genetic combinations. Marcus stopped walking. What do you mean? Scout's scales now showed a 3-dimensional map of dragon genetics, with certain lines highlighted in red. They're trying to breed something. The children they take, the ones they keep alive, they all share certain traits. Before Marcus could respond, alarms began sounding across the colony. Shadowflight's voice boomed from the communication system. All personnel to defensive positions. We have multiple inbound contacts, but these weren't hegemony ships. As Marcus and Scout reached the colony's observation deck, they saw something that made Marcus's heart race with both hope and terror. Dozens of ships were dropping out of hyperspace around Kepler 442b, but these vessels bore the markings of different species. Some he recognized from the colony's xenobiology databases, others completely unknown. Celestine landed on the observation deck, her scales bright with excitement. They have come, she announced. The call for alliance has been answered. The first ship to land belonged to the Altarians, a humanoid species that had been fighting hegemony expansion for decades. Their ambassador, a tall being with blue-tinged skin and 4 arms, approached with obvious relief. I am Ambassador Velteran, the Altarian announced. When we received your transmission about successful resistance to hegemony forces, my government authorized immediate contact. We have been fighting alone for too long. More ships followed. The Crystalline Collective sent representatives who communicated through harmonic vibrations that dragons could interpret naturally. The Zephyrian Republic arrived with organic ships that seemed to be distant cousins of dragon biotechnology. Even the normally isolationist Voidwalkers sent an observer, a being of pure energy that existed in a containment suit. Within hours, the small human colony had become the center of the largest anti-hegemony alliance in galactic history. But with that honor came a terrible realization. The hegemony will not allow this alliance to survive, Velteran warned during the first Joint Council meeting. They will send everything they have to destroy this world before our cooperation can spread. Shadowflight's response was immediate. Then we must strike first. Every day we delay, more children die in their prisons, more worlds fall to their expansion. Dr. Wei stood up, her hands shaking slightly as she addressed the assembled representatives of a dozen species. Before we talk about war, we need to understand what we're really fighting. Scout discovered something about the hegemony's breeding program that changes everything. Scout flew to the center of the council chamber, her scales displaying the genetic analysis she had been working on. The hegemony isn't just enslaving species, she announced in her clear musical voice. They're trying to create something new, a hybrid species that combines the abilities of every race they've conquered. The implications hit the room like a shockwave. The Crystalline Collective's representative created a harmonic that translated as pure horror. The Voidwalker's energy form flickered with what could only be interpreted as rage. They're trying to create the perfect slave species, Marcus realized, beings with all our combined abilities but bred for absolute obedience. Worse, Scout continued, the genetic models they're working from suggest they're close to success, maybe 5-10 years at most. Celestine's voice carried a note of ancient fury when she spoke. Then we end this now, not just to free our children but to prevent the creation of a species designed to enslave the galaxy. The planning that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. 12 species, each with unique capabilities and technologies, working together to plan a coordinated strike against the hegemony's central research facility. Humans provided tactical planning and adaptability. Dragons contributed biotechnology and mobility. Altarians offered their advanced shield technology. The crystalline collective could create weapons that existed partially outside normal space-time. Each species brought something essential to the alliance, but the key to the entire operation came from an unexpected source. The youngest dragons, including Scout, had been collaborating on something they called the Song. It was a form of communication that operated on quantum frequencies, allowing instantaneous coordination across vast distances. "We can link every ship, every fighter, every ground team," Scout explained. "Perfect coordination, perfect timing." The hegemony has never faced anything like this. As the Allied fleet prepared to depart, Marcus found himself in an impossible position. The other Alliance members wanted him to remain on Kepler 442b, safe from the coming battle. But Scout refused to leave without him, and her abilities were crucial to the mission's success. "You started this," Celestine told him as they stood together watching the fleet preparations. "You saved one small dragon and triggered a galactic revolution. It seems fitting that you should see it through to the end." Marcus looked around at the organized chaos of a dozen species preparing for war. Human engineers worked alongside dragon technicians. Altarian strategists compared notes with crystalline philosophers. The Voidwalker was teaching human pilots how to phase shift their fighters partially out of normal space. Scout landed on his shoulder, heavier now than when he had first found her, but still his constant companion. "Are you afraid, Marcus, friend?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "Terrified," he admitted, "but also hopeful. A week ago, I was just a farmer who rescued some starving animals. Now I'm part of something that could change the galaxy." "Not change," Scout corrected him, her scales glowing with determination. "Free. We're going to free the galaxy." As the Allied fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, Marcus realized that his simple act of compassion had become something far greater than he had ever imagined. The rescue of 43 Dragonlings had become the first step toward the liberation of countless worlds. The final battle was about to begin. The Hegemony Central Research Facility hung in space like a metallic cancer, a massive station that had grown over centuries of conquest and experimentation. It was surrounded by defense platforms, patrol fleets, and energy barriers that had never been breached by any enemy force. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Alliance flagship, a hybrid vessel that combined human engineering, dragon biotechnology, and contributions from every member species. Scout perched beside him, her scales now showing the complex patterns of a fully mature dragon despite her young age. The trauma of captivity had actually accelerated her development, and she had grown into her role as the Alliance's primary communication coordinator. "All fleets report ready," Scout announced, her voice carrying across the quantum communication network to hundreds of ships positioned throughout the system. "The song is strong. Every pilot, every gunner, every team leader is connected." Through the viewports, Marcus could see the most incredible sight in galactic history. Dragon wings glided alongside human starfighters. Crystalline vessels that existed partially in hyperspace flew in formation with Altarian cruisers. Voidwalker energy beings had merged temporarily with ship computers, creating hybrid intelligences that could react at the speed of thought. But the true innovation was the children. Young dragons from dozens of rescued groups had volunteered for the mission, not as fighters but as the living network that would coordinate the entire battle. Their natural quantum communication abilities, enhanced by human technology, created an unprecedented level of tactical coordination. "Remember," Celestine's voice came through the communication system from her position leading the Dragon Assault Wing. "This is not just about defeating the Hegemony's military forces. We must rescue every child in that facility and destroy the genetic research that threatens the galaxy's future." The battle began with a coordinated strike that the Hegemony defenders had no framework to understand. Voidwalker energy beings phased through their shields and disabled key systems from within. Crystalline vessels fired weapons that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, bypassing every known defense. Dragons teleported directly into the heart of enemy formations. Their scales adapted to absorb and redirect the Hegemony's energy weapons, but the real breakthrough came when the young dragons implemented something they called the Harmony. Every ship in the Alliance fleet suddenly moved as if controlled by a single mind. Formations shifted and flowed like living organisms. each vessel supporting and protecting its neighbors while maximizing the effectiveness of their combined firepower. Marcus watched in amazement as human fighters, guided by dragon youngsters, performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. Pilots reported that they could feel their ship's position relative to every other craft in the fleet, could anticipate enemy movements before they happened, and could coordinate attacks with split-second precision. The hegemony's response was exactly what the Alliance had expected: overwhelming force applied without regard for collateral damage. They began destroying their own facilities rather than allow them to fall into Alliance hands. But Scout and her network had anticipated this. "Marcus, friend," Scout said, her scales now glowing with the intense concentration required to coordinate hundreds of simultaneous operations. "The children are calling. They're inside the research facility and they know we're here." "How many?" Marcus asked. Scout's scales flickered as she processed data from across the battlefield. "Thousands. Not just dragons. Children from every species the hegemony has conquered. They're all imprisoned in the central laboratory complex. The rescue operation that followed would be studied by military historians for generations. Using intelligence provided by the imprisoned children themselves, Alliance forces penetrated the research facility's deepest levels. What they found there was worse than anyone had imagined. The hegemony hadn't just been taking children, they had been experimenting on them, trying to artificially combine the genetic traits of different species. Many of the young prisoners showed clear signs of surgical modification, biological implants, and genetic manipulation. But they had also found something else. The hybrid beings the hegemony had successfully created weren't the obedient slaves they had intended. Instead, the children had formed their own resistance network within the facility, sabotaging experiments and protecting each other as much as possible. When the first Alliance rescue teams reached the central laboratory, they were met by a young being who appeared to be part human, part dragon, part crystalline collective, and part several other species. Despite the obvious trauma of their situation, the hybrid child stepped forward with clear intelligence and determination. "I am called Synthesis," the child said in a voice that harmonized multiple tones simultaneously. "I speak for all the children here. We have been waiting for rescue, but more importantly, we have been preparing." What followed was the most remarkable moment in the battle. The hybrid children, using abilities that no single species possessed, began systematically shutting down the hegemony's entire research infrastructure. Genetic databases were wiped, laboratory equipment was disabled, and experimental data was destroyed, all while the children guided Alliance forces to the location of every imprisoned youngster in the facility. But the hegemony had one final surprise. As Alliance forces secured the last of the children, the station's central computer activated what appeared to be a self-destruct sequence. However, this wasn't designed to simply destroy the facility. It was meant to create a gravitational anomaly that would consume the entire star system. They would rather destroy everything than lose control, Veltaran observed grimly as the Alliance fleet detected the growing gravitational distortion. But Scout had an idea that was typically draconic in its audacity. "All young dragons, all rescued children, everyone with quantum communication abilities, join the song. We're going to sing this star back to stability." What happened next had no precedent in galactic history. Thousands of young beings from dozens of species, many of them hybrids created by hegemony experiments, combined their abilities to create a quantum harmony that could influence matter at the subatomic level, guided by dragon instincts enhanced by human engineering, and supported by the unique capabilities of every Alliance species. They literally sang the gravitational anomaly out of existence. The star stabilized, the station's destruction was contained, and thousands of children who had spent years or decades in hegemony prisons were finally free. In the aftermath of the battle, as Alliance ships collected refugees and documented evidence of hegemony crimes, Marcus found himself standing in the facility's main laboratory with Scout and Synthesis. The hybrid child had remained close to them throughout the evacuation, clearly interested in these beings who had made rescue possible. "What will happen to us now?" Synthesis asked. "We are not entirely any single species. We do not fit into the galaxy that existed before." Scout's response surprised everyone. "You will help us build a new galaxy, one where being different makes you valuable, not a target." Marcus nodded, understanding what Scout meant. "The Alliance isn't just about defeating the hegemony. It's about creating something better, a galactic community where every species, every individual, can contribute their unique abilities. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the same wheat fields where his adventure had begun, but everything had changed. Kepler 442b had become the capital of the Galactic Liberation Alliance, and his farm had become something unprecedented, a place where beings from dozens of species worked together to create sustainable food production methods that could support the massive refugee populations they were rescuing. Youngsters helped human children tend crops that had been genetically adapted using crystalline technology. Hybrid beings developed new agricultural techniques that combined the best insights from every member species. Even voidwalkers contributed, providing energy that could accelerate plant growth without damaging the ecosystem. Scout, now fully grown and serving as the Alliance's Director of Interspecies Communication, still visited regularly. She would land in the same spot where Marcus had first found her dying, and they would walk the fields together, marveling at how much had changed. "Do you ever regret it?" Scout asked during one of these walks. "Your life was simple before, peaceful," Marcus considered the question as he watched a group of young beings from 7 different species working together to harvest a new strain of grain that could grow in almost any environment. In the distance, he could see the spires of New Harmony City, where the Alliance Council met to coordinate the liberation of systems across the galaxy. "No," Marcus said finally. "I was a farmer who wanted to grow things. Now I'm part of something that's growing hope across the galaxy. That's not a step down. That's the best harvest I could ever have imagined." Scout's scales shimmered with colors that Marcus now knew indicated deep contentment. "And it all started because you saw children in need and chose to help." "It started because one small dragon was brave enough to trust a stranger," Marcus corrected. "Everything else just grew from there." As the twin suns set over Kepler 442b, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, Marcus watched the daily migration of dragons returning to their roosts. Among them flew beings from dozens of worlds, all of them free because one human farmer had decided that compassion was more important than regulations. The galaxy was still healing from centuries of hegemony rule, and there was much work yet to be done. But for the first time in generations, the future held promise instead of fear. And in the fields of Kepler 442b, children of every species played together under alien stars, growing up in a universe where difference was celebrated rather than punished. It was, Marcus thought, the best possible harvest.